Tonight, Ontario expands eligibility to fourth doses of the COVID-19 vaccine.
Collective actions will continue to make a difference as we navigate what is now the seventh COVID-19 pandemic wave.
Who's eligible for another booster and why the province's top doctor says not everyone may need a jab right away. Plus,
ultimately, we made the decision in the last 24 hours with a lot of consideration.
The Toronto Blue Jays fire manager Charlie Montoyo after a tough two-week stretch that saw the team win just 2 of 11 games. And the instructions said to open it at exactly 5 p.m. on this day. We'll show you what's inside the 50-year-old time capsule hidden in North York. Good evening, I'm Kelda Yoon. Starting tomorrow, fourth doses of the COVID-19 vaccine will open up to all adults in Ontario. Those 18 and over who had their first booster shot at least 5 months ago will be able to book an appointment, and those who had COVID-19 will also have to wait at least 3 months after their infection. Now, expanding access to a second booster is something some doctors have been calling for, but as Lorenda Redekop explains, the province's chief medical officer isn't recommending it for everyone just yet.
We've made the decision to expand the eligibility for second boosters to include Ontarians aged from 18 to 59 years of age.
It takes effect tomorrow as cases and hospitalizations have been rising. But the chief medical officer isn't saying everyone necessarily needs a fourth dose right now.
I hope our targeted approach is really to those 18 to 59 with any medical illness, any risk of getting hospitalized. Please come forward and get the second booster dose.
He urged people to talk with their doctor to assess their risk. Dr. Neely Kaplan-Mirth is an Ottawa family doctor who's been fighting for this change.
I'm relieved that we don't have to go to court in order to fight for access to the boosters.
She's run public vaccine clinics called Jabapalooza and is planning her next one for July 24th. She says there is some nuance to who needs the vaccine most, but sees the announcement as mixed messaging.
How are people supposed to gauge their risk without even knowing how many cases are around them? And as a family doctor, and if you look at the wastewater levels, we can tell you cases are there. It's on the rise.
She says younger adults may be at risk, including of long COVID, for example, if they work in a grocery store or at a camp. She'd like to see some mask mandates brought back, given this latest wave. The chief medical officer says he expects it to peak in 2 weeks. He also urged people who don't have their third shot to get it. He says 5 million people who are eligible don't have it. Downtown today, some people wondered if a fourth shot is needed.
The first 3 were. The fourth one might not be because it might not be updated enough yet for new strains.
The chief medical officer expects an Omicron-specific vaccine to come out sometime in fall, and people who get a fourth dose now could still get that one. These two friends say they'd probably do it.
I'm not opposed to getting a fourth dose, though. It is, if it's recommended, I'll do it.
I'm also not opposed to getting it, if it's being offered to us, so.
We'll follow the health advice, I guess, because I am not a doctor. I don't know any better myself. But it does kind of make me think, how many doses is there going to be?
Fourth doses will be available at many pharmacies, doctors' offices, and vaccination clinics. There was one other part of the announcement. The access to free rapid tests is being extended until the end of the year. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
A large statue of Mahatma Gandhi was defaced at a Hindu temple in Richmond Hill today in what police are investigating as a hate crime. And just a warning, some of the images you will see contain graphic language.
Besides a feeling of disgust, I was disappointed that we live in so peacefully in Richmond Hill here, so many years. Nothing has ever happened like this.
The 5-meter-high statue was vandalized around 12:30 this afternoon at Vishnu Mandir in the area of Yonge Street and Garden Avenue. Police say someone defaced the statue with graphic words including rapist and Khalistan. Now, that's the name given to the concept of a Sikh-dominated homeland separate from India. Gandhi was seen as the main leader of India's independence movement in the 1940s, known for promoting non-violent civil disobedience in the campaign to free India from British rule. A man in Whitby is dead following a stabbing this afternoon. Durham police were called to a home on Regatta Crescent just after 3:30. A man suffered life-threatening injuries and died shortly after being rushed to hospital. Police are looking for a male suspect who fled the home. They say it was a domestic-related incident. The homicide unit is now investigating. The man accused of kidnapping Elnaz Hajtamiri made his first court appearance today. Mohamed Lilo will remain behind bars for the time being after the matter was adjourned until next week. Now, Lilo is the ex-boyfriend of Hajtamiri, who remains missing 6 months after being abducted in Wasaga Beach. Ryan Patrick Jones looks into Lilo's ties to Hajtamiri and a GTA shipping company.
35-year-old Mohamed Lilo was rearrested yesterday just outside Montreal, where he lives. He was already charged with harassing his former girlfriend Elnaz Hajtamiri after the couple broke up last fall. And now he's facing additional charges of attempting to kill her last December when she was jumped by masked men and beaten with a frying pan in the parking garage of her Richmond Hill condo building. Hajtamiri left the GTA to the safety of a family member's home in Wasaga Beach, but was abducted there just weeks later. She was forcibly taken by 3 suspects dressed in police gear and driven away in what is believed to be a white Lexus SUV. Her ex-boyfriend Lilo is now facing kidnapping charges in relation to her disappearance.
Our investigators worked very hard to get to this point. We still need to work even harder to find out what happened to Elnaz Hajtamiri, but the evidence they have found have led to enough information that it resulted in the laying of these charges.
Lilo appeared in a Barrie court today via video link from police custody. The matter was put over until Monday, when a date for a bail hearing is expected to be discussed. Lilo's lawyer told CBC yesterday he will be pleading not guilty. As CBC Toronto first reported in April, Lilo had hired a private investigator named Gabriel Kojikaru to track Hajtamiri's movements in the days and weeks leading up to her abduction.
We did some surveillance, we tried to locate her. We did locate her. We just observed, nothing else. We never approached her or anything like that, no.
Kojikaru isn't facing any allegations of wrongdoing. Police say Lilo and Hajtamiri worked together, and CBC Toronto has learned Lilo operated a shipping company that shipped large commercial containers overseas. The company is based out of Quebec, but has an office in this Brampton office park. Police say the investigation continues into Hajtamiri's whereabouts.
The bottom line is we need to find Elnaz Hajtamiri. We need to find out what has happened to her. We owe that to her family. We owe that to the community.
The men who abducted Hajtamiri have yet to be identified, but 2 others have been charged in relation to the condo assault that sent her into hiding. 23-year-old Riyasat Singh of Mississauga was arrested in April. Another 23-year-old Harshdeep Binner from Brampton remains at large. He's wanted on a Canada-wide warrant. Ryan Patrick Jones, CBC News, Toronto.
Toronto police have made an arrest in connection with a bank robbery and stabbing. It happened late last month near Dundas and Spadina. Investigators say a man entered the bank wearing a mask. He pulled out a knife and demanded cash. The man then jumped the counter and demanded money from a teller. The teller complied but was stabbed multiple times. The man then fled. Police have now arrested 43-year-old Mark Webster of Toronto. He's facing numerous charges, including robbery with a weapon and assault with a weapon. Police are looking for several people in connection with a fatal stabbing outside a Mississauga banquet hall earlier this month. Peel police releasing images of 7 persons of interest today. The stabbing left 1 man dead and another seriously injured. On July 4th at approximately 2:30 a.m., police were called to Mississauga Grand Banquet and Events Centre near Hurontario and Britannia. Officers found 2 men with stab wounds. One was pronounced dead at the scene. The other rushed to hospital with serious injuries. Police are asking anyone who may be able to identify any of the men to come forward. Jays manager Charlie Montoyo is out. The Toronto Blue Jays making the announcement today. The decision coming on the heels of a very difficult start to the season for the Jays, with just 2 wins in the last 11 games. Greg Ross has more.
The Blue Jays making the decision to part ways with manager Charlie Montoyo this morning, and it comes on the heels of what has been a terrible couple of weeks for this team. They have just 2 wins in their last 11 games, and with the Jays, by all accounts, underachieving this season, not playing anywhere near expectations, and that includes that high-powered offense. They've underachieved, but the biggest problem for this team has been their pitching staff. That includes both the starting rotation and the bullpen, which have also dealt with a number of injuries this year. But despite all of that, this team is still very much in the playoff picture, and that is why General Manager Ross Atkins felt that a change needed to be made now.
I truly wanted this to work with Charlie and wasn't able to make that happen. I'm extremely disappointed in where we are. I think we are better than how we have played. There's a lot of good individual things happen, and I think we can be playing better as a team. And I have a great deal of respect for Charlie Montoyo. And when this team is winning, he is going to have been a huge part of that.
Replacing Montoyo is bench coach John Schneider, who has been with the team for quite a while. First hired as a coach with the Blue Jays back in 2008, and he's also managed a number of players on this current roster in the minor leagues, and that includes Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette, and he hopes that that knowledge of these players will help him this season.
It's a level of comfort with the guys that I have and that we all have as a staff. We've all been here for 4 years, so I think, knowing them and kind of what makes them tick is something that I'm lucky enough to have.
So Montoyo was first hired by the Blue Jays back in 2019. He actually led them to a playoff berth in that shortened pandemic season in 2020 when they expanded the playoffs. And then last year, when the team had to play a lot of their games in the U.S. because of the pandemic, they fell just short of making the playoffs, but their expectations went through the roof, and they were expected to do so much this season. They didn't live up to those expectations, and that is why Montoyo is out. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Let's go now to Kim McDonald from the Weather Network. Kim, how's it looking out there?
Kelda, we had a little bit of rain, just a little bit, but things are clearing. Now that's both good news and bad news, depending on the scenario. So it's good news that we have a ridge of high pressure building in the overnight because we've got the supermoon, the super buck moon happening. It's the biggest and brightest moon of the year, and it is most visible at 4:30 in the morning. And if you're lucky, you will also see the lineup of Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, and Venus along with it. So that's why it's good that we have mostly clear skies through the overnight. We do have some fog, Barrie, Orangeville, Peterborough, but around the GTA should be okay. A little bit of cloud cover, but for the most part it is clearing. We've got sunshine by the morning, 18 degrees. The reason it's bad news is that we need the rain. We're at a deficit and we're short all across the GTA. In fact, quite a bit short. We only have 11% of normal so far this July. I'll let you know in the long range whether we're getting some.
Thanks so much, Kim. A blast from the past in North York today as a time capsule instructed to be opened on this day at 5 p.m. was unsealed. Ardell Manukduk was there and has this story.
Hidden behind this plaque at the North York Civic Center are pieces of history.
It's a novel. It should be published.
Included in the contents, a letter written by Deborah Marquis.
I am 13 years old and my name is Debbie.
Now 63, Marquis has a daughter here to witness the moment, and while it was fun to read the letter she penned 50 years ago, it was the one her parents wrote that got her choked up.
Mom and I hope that you have lived a good and happy life, that you all have good and happy families. And then my mom wrote underneath, Dear Glenn, Debbie, and Donnie, on this special day my heart is filled with many thoughts and hopes.
Her father, former councillor Rob Buell, is seen here holding the North York flag, which was also in the canister. Meanwhile, Mayor John Tory rummaged through old newspapers, finding a coincidental headline somewhat mirroring today's Blue Jays news.
Calling for the firing of the coach of the Toronto Argonauts, and on a day when we, I think, saw some management changes in the baseball team.
Well, for me as a news junkie, I'm interested in seeing what was going on back then and just seeing the size of the newspapers. And you see that a lot of the issues don't change, issues about housing.
The capsule offered the chance to reflect on how far North York has come, from a small residential suburb in the early 70s to the beginnings of something more a few years later, when Mayor Mel Lastman officially opened the North York Municipal Hall.
1972 was the 50th anniversary of the independence of North York or the township of North York from the township of York.
On that day, at that time in June or July, North York was an agricultural pub with a population of 6,000 people, whereas today North York is home to some 800,000 people.
Mayor John Tory reflecting on how Mel Lastman had ambition and vision for a dynamic downtown North York, something he applies to how he leads the city of Toronto today. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. In a surprise move, the Bank of Canada has increased its trend-setting interest rate by a full percentage point. It now stands at 2.5%.
An increase of this magnitude in one meeting is very unusual. It reflects very unusual economic circumstances.
It's the biggest interest rate hike in more than 20 years as the central bank works to drive down inflation. Today's increase had been expected to come in at 0.75% or 75 basis points. The increase will affect Canadians with variable rate mortgages and lines of credit. In the U.S., inflation has shot to a 40-year high. The figures for June show American consumers are paying 9.1% more than they were at the same time last year. The increase was driven by surging prices for everyday necessities, including gasoline, food, and rent. Grocery prices are up more than 12% in the U.S., and rent jumped almost 6%. Gas prices have dipped slightly in recent weeks, but they remain at historically high levels. Inflation in Canada is running at almost 8%. Well, it's been 3 years since the province overhauled its OSAP funding system. The changes narrowed eligibility for grants and increased expected parental contribution for loans. As some students look ahead to the fall semester, they say those changes are only adding to their financial burden. Farah Morali has more.
I am the first to go to university in my family.
Getting into York University was a big deal for Alexis DePonte, but she quickly learned she wasn't eligible for OSAP. She got the news the day before her high school graduation. She says her family lives paycheck to paycheck and simply doesn't have enough to fund her education.
He's working 7 days a week, 12-hour days, and it's still not even making at all what I need to go to university. So it's like, how do you come up with that after all these past years of like barely making enough?
In 2019, the Ontario government made big changes to OSAP. It made dependent students ineligible for grants if their families earned more than $140,000. When it came to loans, it increased the expected parental contribution. With the cost of pretty much everything going up these days, some students say they're feeling the pinch of those changes now more than ever.
I had to take on 2 jobs this past school year just to, be able to sustain myself.
Vivian Miata is a third-year McGill student who has been impacted by those changes. She says she's watched more grants turn into loans, and it doesn't even cover tuition.
I feel like, OSAP hasn't really reflected like the increased living costs this past year. Obviously, groceries have gotten so expensive, everything in terms of like rent.
The phasing out of remote learning is only adding to the financial burden for some.
With the return to in-person learning, coming back to campus, moving away from home potentially, students have extra costs associated with housing, food, transportation.
It's prompting some students to make tough decisions.
If you don't have the funds to pay off the rest of the amount that OSAP doesn't cover, it's like that affects whether or not how many classes you can take. It can affect whether you're even going to be attending school that semester.
In a statement, the Ministry of Colleges and Universities said it cut tuitions by 10% in 2019 and froze it for 2020 and 2021. It says it will maintain the freeze in the upcoming year.
Why can't they just put aside more money for students themselves?
As for DePonte, she says she'll have enough to cover first year. It's how she'll be able to continue. That's the big question. Farah Morali, CBC News, Toronto.
You're looking at a live shot of the Toronto skyline. Partly cloudy tonight. Temperature is a little bit cooler than last night. Currently sitting at 20 degrees downtown. Let's go back to Kim McDonald from the Weather Network. And Kim, it's been a pretty dry couple of months. A bit of relief tonight, but not much.
Kelda, we had a little bit of rain Not much. What's normal for this time of year? Well, daytime highs should be around 27 degrees. That's normal for July the 14th. We're headed to 26. The record was 34.9. We have to go back to 2005 for that kind of heat. Have you noticed the sun is setting just a little bit earlier? Now we're before 9 p.m. 8:58 is the normal sunset. I know, a little bit of a tear coming down. Temperatures 26 degrees, as I mentioned, and it's not going to be particularly sticky. On Thursday, we've got a little bit of humidity, but not much. That humidity is going to build, though, through the long range. It'll feel like 29 in Oakville, 28 in Toronto. Guelph, no real humidity, 25. Same thing for Kitchener. And the hours of sunlight. So the sun sets just a little before 9, but we've got plenty of sunlight during the day, 13 hours, 12, 13 for the next 3 days. It's not really until Sunday that the clouds start to roll in. But when you get that kind of sunlight, you also get some very strong UV rays. And so we're looking at a number of around 8, which puts us in the category of very high. So anywhere between 8 and 10. So that means extra precautions required. Don't slap on that sunscreen just once in the day and let it go, right? A couple of times. Take some breaks, get into the shade, but yeah, protect your skin. As far as temperatures are concerned, in the long range forecast, we're 28, 29, 30. We stay up around there for the next several days. No real surprises when it comes to temperatures in July. This is pretty good. And we're not looking at any real heat waves either. So we're just in that sweet spot, I think, if you like temperatures this warm. So the next 3 days looking like sunshine, but then the rain. This is what we need. Sunday night into Monday, we'll finally see some showers.
Thanks so much, Kim. Finally tonight, Toronto's first accessible baseball diamond is now ready for action, and it bears the name of a late star Blue Jays pitcher. The Roy Halladay Field at Scarborough's Highview Park will be used by a baseball program for kids with cognitive and physical disabilities.
A dream that Roy and I had, and always hoped someday we'd see, and I'm just so excited that it's here in Toronto for all of these kids.
Halladay died tragically in a plane crash in Florida in November 2017. He spent 12 seasons with the Blue Jays. The new field was made possible with a $1 million grant from Jays Care. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Have a great night, everyone.